Live from Liverpool, the Dark Paranormal, Dark Bites.
Hello Patreons, and welcome back to Dark Bites. And hello to all of our new Patreons. Thank you for joining. It's a pleasure to have you here, and I hope you find this community to be as engaging and as supportive as I certainly do. And if you're new to Dark Bites, today's episode should be the perfect introduction to what we're all about here on Dark Bites. Especially as today I'm looking forward to doing this episode. I always do. Dark Bites is my favourite thing that I do. And it's because of what you're about to hear. And when I say that, yes, I'm yet to read these things out, but I know what's to come. And it's these wonderful little segments of weirdness which leave you walking away wondering why these things took place, questioning why these things happened to these individuals, and you walk away with these sort of experiences that we will cover playing over and over in your mind. Because very rarely on Dark Bites do we ever get any sort of conclusion. We get plenty of jump-off points, or things which will make you want to look into something further. But Dark Bites is very much more open-ended than the Dark Paranormal, and I love it for that reason. It allows our brains and our minds to take over the narrative of the story. We not necessarily invent what took place, but we can theorise on the reasons why. And so, without any further ado, let's jump right into this edition of Dark Bites. And our first submission is not a submission. I know that sounds contradictory, but it comes in from self-confessed Man United fan Brad from London, who now lives in Carmarthenshire, Wales. And he says, "Hi Kevin, this isn't me submitting an experience, it's me acknowledging an episode. I've been sitting on sending this email for a few days now and thought, sod it, why not? When I saw the episode title, Epping Forest, it sent an emotion through me somewhere between anxiety and fear. You see, I pretty much grew up exploring Epping Forest, as my grandmother lived on a moderate-length walk to the outskirts of the forest, and a short bus ride to one of the main entrances. Summer holidays were spent hiking, swimming in the lakes, and generally exploring the forest, and many of its hidden areas. So it's fair to say I know it pretty well. However, I remember one summer, I was about 9 or 10, when my parents, along with my aunt and uncle, thought it would be a good idea to go exploring in the middle of the night, taking myself, my sister, and 2 cousins along with them. From that night on, I've had an underlying fear of that place. You were right when you said that the forest had its own identity, which changes, because that place has never been the same for me since then. Although we never saw or experienced anything, it felt like we were being watched. Either that, or it was just the overactive imagination of a child. Fast forward 20-odd years later, with me working for the London Ambulance Service, and very frequently being pulled into the London boroughs of Waltham Forest and Redbridge, the boroughs which Epping sits. And I'd still get that very same oppressed feeling just driving through it, or sometimes actually going to a call within the forest. Unfortunately, they would usually be a suicide, especially on a night shift. The heebie-jeebies is an understatement. Like I say, I've never experienced anything ghostly, but that place definitely takes on an aura. I've been a listener for a good while, and unlike the other podcasts I listen to, I never come across an episode of yours I don't fancy listening to. Keep up the fantastic show, and I wish you a very happy new year. Brad. Well, thank you, Brad, and a happy new year to you too. And thank you for your email. Now, Brad in there does not say he doesn't want it read out on the show, so I thought I would share it for two reasons. Firstly, it kind of validates that Epping Forest was a good candidate for a Dark Realm. It's especially nice to receive validation from someone who's experienced the things mentioned within the episode. And secondly, to point out to everyone listening right now that your experience or whatever you send in to contact@thedarkparanormal.com does not need to be your experience. It can be how you felt about an episode, it can be what that brought back to you. Basically, we are a community here, and any emails sent from our Patreons or messages left on the board, I receive, and I read them all. I'll be the first to admit I'm terrible at replying to them, but sometimes I enjoy watching the back and forth as people do comment on comments. It's a wonderful community, and it just reiterates, especially with Brad's email, that we want to hear from you if any episodes had an effect on you. We're trying to do something bigger than just a paranormal show. And there is a wonderful word called qualia, which means basically I can't describe what I'm trying to say. And this show for me has a certain qualia about it. It's not your standard, boo, let's all go and have a good scare and then worry about it at night, especially on Dark Bites. It feels like we're trying to dig, in the most respectful way, to find some answers. And it may well be a fool's errand, but at least we are trying. And to quote my beautiful, now deceased, lovely Irish nan, God loves a trier. Well, let's hope so. Our next email comes in from Sandra, and this is one of those emails where I think we may split a few hairs. Hi, Kevin. I've been listening to The Dark Paranormal for what feels like forever. I've considered sending in this earlier, but never had the courage. This isn't just one experience, but multiple experiences. And I've attached a video too. Trust me, people have tried to debug the video. Mostly my husband, he does not believe me. My daughter, my son, or my mother, who have all experienced this presence. I'll start with my first experience. I was alone in the house with my dog. We were hanging out watching TV at night. A loud noise, like either someone pushed over the bureau or had jumped through a window on the first floor. My dog was barking like crazy. We walked towards my daughter's room on the first floor where I believed the sound had came from, baseball bat in hand. Maybe not my best idea at the time. However, my dog was also with me, and he would have protected me against any person. Anyway, we make it to my daughter's room, and nothing. I searched her room, her closet, under the bed, and as I did so, footsteps ran over my head in my son's room. I thought for sure there was a person, and before I could do anything, my dog was upstairs barking and investigating. I ran upstairs, baseball bat still in hand, and again, nothing. Not under the bed, not in the closet. The windows were locked from the inside. I called my husband, who thought I was insane. Said I was hearing things. Said it was the TV, all things that made me feel crazy. I tabled that experience because again I felt crazy. The next time my daughter and I were going through clothes in my room, sorting through and getting rid of old clothing, she was picking through things she wanted to keep for herself, when suddenly one of my dog's large bones, it was one of the cow bones that had knuckles on each side, rolled down our 7-foot hallway and stopped at the door entrance. I started to blame the dog. When my daughter yelled, he was on the bed with us. Again, no one but us was in that house. In between this and the next, I would always hear noises from my son's room, always during the night, and I finally asked him why he was making so much noise up there. He said, "You can hear it too." He said it happens all the time, but he doesn't feel threatened, so has never said anything. He's since moved out, and I still hear the sounds like someone's walking or doing things upstairs. Which brings me to the video I've attached. I was working from home and heard what sounded like a typewriter noise coming from that room. I began recording, and it didn't stop. I sent it to my husband again, and again he tried debunking it. There were no electronics on. The heating wasn't on because this is a house built in the 70s. It has force hot water heat, but still doesn't sound like a typewriter. The next time, my mum and I were visiting, and my basement door just popped open. Now, to open the door, you'd need to turn the knob and pull. She asked, "Did you see that?" And I joked, "Oh yeah, that's just Nessie, the ghost." Now, when she comes over, when we're not home, to let the dog out and such, she said this isn't the first time it's happened, and she was visibly scared. This last, what I will call a big experience, may or may not have anything to do with the presence that's in my home. My daughter recently got her driver's license, and she wanted to go to a local coffee shop. She has this attachment that hooks to her dashboard that she places her phone in for music, GPS and such, and the phone faces the driver and the back seat of the car, behind the driver. As we were waiting in line at the drive-thru, she decided to change her music while she must have been on a camera app. When she unlocked her phone, because it was in selfie mode, in the back seat behind her was a young teenage boy. But when I turned round, the back seat was empty. I lost it. I jumped out of the car. She saw it too and was scared, but thought maybe it was an app or a filter or a picture she had taken, but nothing of the sorts. I can still see this boy, about 5'5", dirty blonde shaggy hair, and a black zip-up hooded sweatshirt, a dark t-shirt underneath, and jeans. Again, I don't know if there's a connection, but this was my first time seeing and not just hearing. Even if my story doesn't make it to the show, I'd love to hear your thoughts, because I have so many. Sincerely, Sondra. Well, to our audience, what we have is Sondra's video. What you're going to hear is the audio, and I will fully explain the audio is the prime thing here, because the remainder of Sondra's video is just footage of her stares. There's nothing to see there in terms of paranormality. But what you're listening for is the key thing, and we're about to play what Sondra recorded. Tell me what you make of this. Now, I appreciate it's quite hard to make out, and I have done my best to try and improve both the EQ and the volume on the recording, but you can definitely tell where it begins and ends at the very end, so I'll just replay that last segment of the clip. Now, the full video that Sondra supplied is over a minute in length, and there is a consistency to what I can only assume, as Sondra says, somebody using a typewriter. Now, my issue is, am I hearing that because I've been told it's that? Almost like an EVP phenomena. So, for example, you may be told by someone who thinks they've caught an EVP, listen to this, and you hear static. And then they say, did you not hear I'm from the dead? And they'll play it again, and you hear I'm from the dead. So my point being, did the suggestion from Sondra to say it was a typewriter lead me to only hear a typewriter? Well, that could be disputed. One thing that cannot be disputed is that there is a definite sound coming from Sondra's home upstairs when she is home alone. I'll play that recording one more time and see if you can maybe figure out what else it could be if we remove the typewriter theory. Let's have a quick break to ask you a personal question. Are you feeling overwhelmed by hormonal changes? If you're a woman, you're definitely not alone. There are more than 1,000 hormone disruptors living rent-free in our environment right now. Our food, our water, the air we breathe, the clothes we wear, our skincare. You would not believe the amount of things that can mess with our hormones. Even nature likes to put us through hormonal changes, premenopause, menopause, and while it's a natural process, it doesn't mean you're meant to suffer through it. And the good news is you don't have to suffer through it anymore because we now have Hormone Harmony, a formula made with only herbal ingredients that are shown to reduce hormonal symptoms in women of all ages. Happy Mammoth, the company that created Hormone Harmony, is dedicated to making women's lives easier. And that means using only science-backed ingredients that have been proven to work for women. They make no compromise when it comes to quality, and it shows. Hormone Harmony is not just a hormone-supporting supplement, it's become a phenomenon. Women cannot stop talking about it on social media. A bottle of Hormone Harmony sells every 24 seconds. And the biggest benefit? Feeling like myself again. That's what women mention over and over in their over 30,000 plus reviews for Hormone Harmony. For a limited time, you can get 15% off your entire first order at happymammoth.com. Just use the code DARKParanormal at checkout. That's happymammoth.com and use the code DARKParanormal for 15% off today. Now, I will say this in defense of Sondra. The video she supplied is literally of her stood in her hallway on her own, filming that sound. In addition, what we're hearing there is the mobile phone's microphone trying to pick up that typewriter sound. Sondra was there in the flesh, with much better hearing than we've heard there, and she says it sounded like a typewriter. That must count for something when we analyse that sound. But for me, the most chilling part of the entire narrative is when she mentions the noises to her son, and her son replies, "You hear them too." So Sondra, thank you so much for such a captivating email. And if anyone out there has their own theory on what we've just listened to, then do let us know. Contact at thedarkparanormal.com. As ever, the only thing we expect from our listeners is respect to the fact that Sondra has submitted her own experience. So if you want to critique what you've heard, by all means do so. This is not a closed-mind society, but also be respectful. But Sondra, when we accumulate everything that you put in your email, it seems like there's certainly something going on in your home. It's what you do about it next that really matters. So do please keep us informed. Now, I've said numerous times on Dark Bites that some of our most terrifying, thought-provoking experiences have come in the form of one or two paragraphs. I've used the analogy of me watching The Exorcist for 2 hours, getting a 5-minute cab ride home, and the 5-minute cab ride home, due to a ghost story told to me by the driver, being much more terrifying than the film. And our next account is truly a piece of gold when it comes to these sort of experiences, because the submitter even signs off with the sentence, "I don't expect this to make the show. I just had a feeling you'd want to hear this." That's how short their experience is, but when I read it, genuinely, I couldn't get it out of my head. I shared it with so many of my non-paranormal friends that they were a bit like, "I don't get it. What's scary about that?" And I thought, the Patreons will get it. So this non-submission, if you will, is from Ray. And Ray writes, "I hope you're well. My name is Ray and I travel a lot for work. I tend to fill that time with podcasts, and I mentioned to a friend that I was looking for a new one. She recommended The Dark Paranormal. I love your show and thank you for the content. I've just finished with season 1, the Amityville episode. As soon as it finished, I felt compelled to share. So, here we go. My grandmother was a professional photographer back in the days before digital. It's how she made her living. She was also an avid believer in the supernatural. In pursuit of this passion, she managed to arrange an overnight stay in the Amityville home. When it came time to go, she did so with extreme excitement. My grandmother came back and she was quite disappointed. She said she heard a few unintelligible whispers and a couple of knocks, but that was it. She did take a ton of pictures though, and held out hope that she caught maybe something. Fast forward 3 days later, grandmother had a dark room in the basement. After developing the film, she gathered up the equipment she used whilst there. She took it and the pictures and the negatives outside. What she couldn't burn, she broke apart with a hammer and buried it. Hammer and all. I don't know what she caught. She took that to the grave. She never mentioned it again. She wouldn't even acknowledge any attempts to address the subject. I know this raises questions and answers none. However, considering my grandmother's obsession with both the paranormal and photography, for her to refuse anything to do with either convinces me she caught something. I don't expect this to make the show. I just had a feeling you'd like to hear this. Thank you again for the content. I love the show and your presentation. I wish you well, Ray." Now, I often talk in this show about authenticators. You'll be tired of me talking about authenticators. For the new listeners, what I mean by that is little things which kind of stand out that somebody who's making up a story would not include. And as it's my job to read sometimes 20 emails a day, all to do with a paranormal experience, they become very obvious to spot. And I put them to one side because there's something special about them. Now, Ray didn't even want this to be on an episode. Not as in, please don't air, just as in, I don't think there's enough here to go on the show, but I think you, Kevin, will enjoy to know this fact. And those very few paragraphs that Ray sent over, not looking for them to be aired, have stuck with me ever since I received them. Because as he rightly put in his email, this asks many questions and answers none. Amityville is one of those places where it's often debunked, mainly thanks to the Lutz family, and their attempts to make a small fortune out of what should be a harrowing event. And what I mean by that is, like I've said many a time before, Roland Doe, the original boy who allegedly was possessed by the devil which inspired The Exorcist, has been sought out. But he never wants to reveal his identity. We are talking about a boy who sparked arguably the most famous paranormal film in history and would literally be sitting on millions worth of dollars in merchandise, interviews, books, yet has refused. Because I believe when something truly dark enters your life and you experience it like Ray's grandmother, you never want to talk about it again. Maybe in the fear you'll bring it back. Historically, I've been not too kind towards the Warrens, Ed and Lorraine. I've not said anything specifically too jarring towards them, but one thing I do know as fact is they turned up at the Enfield case, and Maurice Grosse, being the lead investigator, kindly let them enter the house, and I think it was Ed Warren who sat him down and said, "You're sitting on a gold mine here." At which point, Maurice, from the SPR, kindly showed him to the door and led him down the path. Because Maurice wasn't interested in the money. Maurice wanted to investigate what was going on. And I'm not stating that there's not any element of truth in the Ed and Lorraine Warrens case files or anything along those lines. I will say, very similar to the British psychic Derek Acorah, he did have a great reputation in Liverpool as being a perfect medium. He could see things, he would approach people in the street, and he would tell them things that he's been told he needs to pass on. When he was signed by Most Haunted because of his reputation, I genuinely believe he felt the pressure to perform. And he was a performer. And as anyone who's ever done a ghost vigil or a haunted house sit-out will tell you, you will spend hours upon hours with nothing happening. But that doesn't make for good TV. And I think Derek knew this. So when somebody purposefully slipped him a false name, and he, rather embarrassingly, got possessed by this imaginary person, it spelled disaster for his career. It didn't help matters, and in fact only sharpened the knives of the skeptics, that the person he was possessed by was in fact an anagram of the words Derek Faker. And all of a sudden, because of that one mistake that he made, trying to entertain, trying to make the show better arguably, and trying to keep an audience both for himself and for the network, his entire back catalogue of anything he'd done was tarred with the same brush of fakery. Basically, the baby was thrown out with the bathwater. And I believe that's what happened with the Warrens. I believe, no doubt, they were enthusiastic paranormal investigators keen to be what a lot of people still perceive them to be. However, by the time we reach Enfield, they were looking for money. Yet they still feature strongly in the Enfield version of The Conjuring, although they literally had 5 minutes in the home. But let's never let facts get in the way of a good story. And we'll end today with an email that says, "Hi Kevin. Firstly, thank you for a great podcast. I only discovered it earlier this year, but I'm plowing through the episodes. Some of the submissions are truly astounding. I personally haven't had a paranormal experience, and I'm not sure how I'd react if I did. I want to say that listening to Jeremiah's experience in Minisode 19 really touched the nerve. He's right in what he says about self-destructive behaviour, bringing negative energy and evil into your life. And it's because of his experience that I had a good hard look at my life and its direction, or lack thereof, and decided then and there to make some major changes. The experience submitted to the show are amazing, but it's also interesting to hear how they affect individuals and how they live their life afterwards. I hope Jeremiah is doing well. His submission has touched at least one listener. Now, I say this every time, and people may misconstrue it for me looking for more content for the podcast, which simply isn't the case. I think it's vitally important we share as much as we can about the paranormal world. That email right there is sincerely genuine. Literally, the experience from Jeremiah has changed someone's life. And that was a mini-sode. So if you're sat there and you think no one will want to hear my experience, you do not know that. That's your opinion. If Jeremiah did not send in his experience, the individual who wrote that email, by all accounts, was on the road to ruin, until he heard Jeremiah's email. And with it being a mini-sode, it was only 3 pages long. No one even expects you to put that in when you send an email over, as Ray's email about the Amityville photographs proved. So I implore you that if you are sat on something, no matter how small, which is either weird or slightly in the darker realms of the paranormal, email it over to contact@thedarkparanormal.com. And yes, I do say the darker realms of the paranormal because that's what this show is. There are plenty of other podcasts who will accept the stories of a pet ghost or things like that, or a nice grandma coming to wish you good night. We don't tend to do that here. We want to remind people the paranormal can be dangerous. The paranormal is dangerous. And I've said this many times before, but how many times in a work environment have you heard somebody say, "I'm sure I heard the pitter-patter of my deceased dog's paws last night," and the whole place accepts it and says, "Ah." Yet if somebody then pipes up, "I was dragged out of bed by my hair last night," no one says "ah," no one believes them, but it's okay to believe in the dead dog walking around the home. We're dealing with one and the same subject, just light and dark. Therefore, if your story is light, there are plenty of places that will take that, and rightly so. There's a place for that. It's just not here. So until next week, thank you ever so much for your submissions, for your support, and for being here for your show, Dark Bites. Once more, the email address, if you wish to submit your experience, and I think today's episode proves you should, it's contact@thedarkparanormal.com. And until next week, take care.